Hello everyone, welcome to Focus Weekly for the module of International Relation and Internal Security. The topic we are going to discuss in this session, the topic I'm going to take in this session are first about the India's nuclear energy sector. In the backdrop of this topic, India's nuclear energy sector, we'll tell you about the dynamics of Indo-US nuclear deal, what led to the deadlock on the Indo-US nuclear deal. Okay. And one of the important law which might have been ignored by most of you while studying your newspapers is the law passed by the Indian Parliament, that is CLNDA, with the name CLINDA, that is Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act 2010. So there can be a question around this particular law as it was in the news, as recently in her budget speech, in her budget speech, Finance Minister has said that now our target is to increase our energy generation to 1 lakh megawatt to 1 lakh megawatt through nuclear technology by 2047. So Finance Minister has set a very ambitious target of increasing our energy generation through nuclear technology by 2047. And what all the issues prevail or what all the issues around this we'll discuss in this particular video. Second is Trump's announcement of taking over Gaza. What all can be important from this particular aspect for our pre-exam. And third, in her budget speech itself, Finance Minister has announced to increase aid for our neighboring countries. So in this aspect, we'll discuss India's neighborhood first policy. Okay, one of the important topic for our mains. So these three issues I'm going to take in this particular session. So let's start our discussion with first aspect, that is energy generation through nuclear technology. And a very important article in this aspect was written by T. Rajamohan recently. So a lot of aspects are covered in this particular editorial. I'll tell you what all is important to know. Here it is written, the law CLNDA. Okay, so there are two laws which governs our nuclear energy sector are first Atomic Energy Act and second Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act. So Atomic Energy Act 62 and Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act passed by Parliament in 2010. So these two things are in news, as in speech, Finance Minister has said we are going to bring reforms in this particular act. So there can be a question in pre on this particular law. So now what all you need to know about this is that if we compare the dynamics of our ties with US and Russia, okay, it seems as if US is now the closest strategic ally of ours. The kind of engagement right now we are having, it seems as if US has displaced Russia as the closest strategic ally of India. But it will be too early to assume this, as the strategic sectors like defense and nuclear cooperation, we have more vibrant engagement till date with Russia over US. Russia has already constructed the Kudankulam nuclear power plant, which is critical. Critical means it has started generating energy. And the Indo-US nuclear deal is in deadlock since 2010. Now, why this deal is in deadlock, we need to understand. I need to give you a bit of the background, and all this background is very important and relevant from pre-point of view. As CLNDA is in the news, these aspects can be explored by UPSC in the pre-exam. First is NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, signed in 68. What it stands for? That other countries should not acquire weapons. Within NPT, a dateline was opted, that is 67. And as per this treaty, those countries who took over, who acquire weapon by 67, they are legitimate nuclear weapon states. Rest, no other country are allowed to acquire weapon. And the P5 are the countries who have acquired nuclear weapon. So by 67, P5 acquired weapon and they declare themselves as the nuclear weapon state under NPT. So the mandate and the objective of NPT is, other than 5, no other country is allowed to have weapon. That is why India considers this treaty as discriminatory and India has not signed NPT. So take it as your homework. Other than India, which other countries are not signatory of NPT? Okay. So India decided we are not going to sign it as it is discriminatory. Now, India became the first country other than the P5 who acquire nuclear weapon technology in 1974, as India went for its first nuclear weapon test. Fearing that proliferation of nuclear weapon technology has taken place in the world, countries created a grouping called NSG in 74, stands for Nuclear Supplier Group. Okay, so Nuclear Supplier Group created in 74. NSG grouping is the grouping of those countries who have technology, who have uranium, and who have the best of the equipments, which countries need for the construction of nuclear power plant. Now, NSG grouping, the members of the NSG decided we will give or we will support countries in generation of nuclear energy only if they will sign NPT. So if a country is signing NPT means country is giving commitment that country does not aspire for acquiring weapon. Okay. So once country is giving commitment that country is not aspiring for weapon, that country can seek help and support from NSG. Okay. And NSG will support for which purpose? NSG will support for civilian use. Okay, so NSG members will give technology and uranium for civilian purpose. Now, nuclear technology is dual use. Means if you're getting it for civilian purpose, you can if you keep going for enrichment of uranium, you can turn that uranium into a weapon grade fuel. So enrichment beyond one point will turn uranium into a weapon grade fuel. So nuclear technology is dual use. Now, how we will ensure that the technology which we are giving to a country will not be channelized for military purpose? For this, there is a grouping called IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. Very important grouping. Okay. So IAEA will ensure that the technology which is being given for civilian purpose should not be channelized for military use. Okay. So it was decided that if you seek support from NSG, you need to sign NPT and you need to keep your nuclear plants under IAEA. Means you cannot deny the access of your nuclear power plants to IAEA officials. They can come and see what all is going on in your nuclear power plant. You are not channelizing it for military purpose. Okay. And this exactly is the issue which is prevailing at present between US and Iran, as Iran is a signatory of NPT. So Iran is getting support from NSG, and the blame of the US is covertly Iran is trying to channelize this technology for military purpose, and Iran is denying the access of its power plants to the IAEA officials. Okay, so this is one of the issue between US and Iran. So I hope this much is clear to all of you, that for what NSG will support. Now, growth. Economic growth requires, prerequisite for growth is energy. So generation of energy through nuclear technology is much cheaper. If you will not able to generate energy through nuclear technology, you have to rely on other sources of energy, and your economy will be too much dependent on the, if you do not have the sufficient oil and gas resources, you will going to import. For example, India. So we are generating a lot of energy through the import, as we do not have sufficient resources of our own. We are importing a lot of oil, and this makes us dependent on West Asia. Okay. So as we import huge oil and gas, we have to spend a lot for the import of these resources, and for growth, energy is prerequisite. Now for growing economy, and now we have set a target to achieve that. Now we have already set a target to achieve to take the economy to $5 trillion economy and further to $7 trillion economy. Energy security is our core concern. India decided not to sign NPT, and that is why NSG refused to help India to generate energy through nuclear technology. We are uranium deficient. We only have 2% of the world uranium, which is fissionable. So we are dependent on the countries of the world and NSG to generate energy through nuclear technology. But we were not getting any kind of support. So we were running our nuclear program through our indigenous efforts. Okay. So India was running its nuclear program through its own indigenous efforts. Now, in 2008, dynamics changed and India got a waiver, a India-specific waiver was given to India from NSG, which was pushed by US. Okay, that despite not signatory to NPT, India can go for nuclear cooperation with NSG members. And this push came from US. As India got the waiver, it increased the, it clearly established this aspect that India is a responsible nuclear weapon state, and it increased the political profile of India also in world affairs, that despite not signatory to NPT, India got the waiver. Out of all the non-signatory countries of NPT, India is the only country who has got this waiver. Okay, and that is why post 2008, India started signing nuclear deals with many countries. Like first deal we signed with it was with France, Russia, US, Australia, Canada, and most recent nuclear deal we have concluded with Japan. So now India, as India got the waiver, it means India can import uranium, equipments, and technology from the NSG members. Okay. But despite this waiver, now coming back to the discussion, which is important, despite this waiver, India has failed to fetch much of the benefits. Okay, why so? Because in 2010, Indian Parliament passed the law CLNDA, Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act. Okay, so India passed this law, Parliament, Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act. Now, I hope you all know this, that our track record on the issue of nuclear accident is very bad. One of the biggest industrial disaster which we have seen is Bhopal gas tragedy. Now, one thing, in case of any industrial accident, one thing, there will be health hazard for the victims. And second is they will further face legal harassment because they will seek compensation from the corporates. So, considering the kind of learning from our previous experience, realizing this, that our track record is very poor, the government of that time in 2010, the UPA government, decided that we need to give legal protection to the victims, that in case of an accident in a nuclear power plant, victims should not suffer. There should not be double suffering for the victims. That one, they are suffering from health-wise, and second, they are facing a lot of sufferings by facing legal harassment. So it is not the responsibility of the victims to approach judiciary and seek compensation. Without this legal protection, without this law, the standard procedure would have been that victims needs to approach judiciary. Judiciary will set up an investigation committee. Committee will set up its report, and then finally verdict will come that who needs to give compensation and how much to the victim. So government realized that we do not want victims to suffer. So our law, CLINDA, was pro-victims. Okay. In any legal battle, it is always the corporates who can afford the best of the legal services. Okay. So government decided we need to give legal protection to the victims. So CLINDA is seen as pro-victims. And that is why India is seen as a country which is not good for doing business, especially by the corporates, that there are too much of legal hassles. Okay. That state is always tilted more toward its socialist objectives. And UPA government was with the help of the left party. So this law was brought to give legal protection to the victims. And what was decided in this is, now accident in a nuclear power plant can only be because of two reasons. One, because of the operational failures, and second because of the equipment failure. Okay. Now, who is the operator of nuclear power plant in India? It is NPCIL, a PSU, Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. Still, there are two sectors which are entirely regulated by the state, in which private investments are not allowed. That is atomic energy and railways. So private players cannot build the nuclear power plants entirely under the control of the state. Sectors in which private investment is not allowed, or sectors in which license is required, these are two different things. Okay. So sectors in which private investment not allowed are these. Do check for how many sectors still in India license is required. Okay. So atomic energy is entirely controlled by the government. That is by Department of Atomic Energy. And this department is directly under Prime Minister's office. And who is the operator? NPCIL. So accident can take place because of the operational failure or because of the equipment failure. Who will going to be the supplier of equipments? The companies of different countries, France, Russia, US. Okay. Right. Now, if you're aware of the Fukushima disaster, which took place in Japan, that Fukushima disaster was not because of the operational failure. It was because of equipment failure. The core of the power plant was built by Hitachi. And tsunami came, tsunami hit the coast. And before the operators would have shut down the power plant, core blasted. So the Japanese government made company liable to pay money to the victims. Learning from that, we realized that we also need to make sure that private players cannot run from the liability. So if any accident will take place because of equipment failures, then they have to pay money to the victims. And under this law, 1,500 crore rupees liability was fixed. Okay. So if any accident will take place, operator has to pay money. But there's a clause in this law which allowed the operator to shift the liability to the supplier companies, that they can demand money from them if they can establish this, that the disaster or the accident took place because of equipment failure. And US companies raised issues against this clause, that how you can put the liability on us. Okay, we are ready to give you the best of the equipment. We are ready to, you do checks. Okay, you do check the quality of the equipment. We are ready to rectify if you found any fault in these equipment, we are ready to rectify it. But once you have used this, once you have brought it into the operational stage, after that you cannot put back the liability on us. So there is this issue that we are not ready to bear the liability. There's another clause in CLINDA which allowed the victims to claim more compensation. Okay, so when this law was brought, according to the government, we cannot calculate what could be the scale of the disaster, how much money could have been required to the victims. So we cannot take the sovereign right away from the victims that they cannot claim more compensation. So this right was given to the victims that they can claim more compensation. To claim more, they have to approach judiciary, and then judiciary will decide how much more is required and who needs to pay the compensation. So because of this liability issue, Indo-US nuclear deal got stuck. And now in her budget speech, finance minister has clearly said we are ready to bring reforms in this law to make sure that corporate interest will be protected. And in this context, this law is in the news. So there can be a question on this law. So the two acts which govern our nuclear energy sector is Atomic Energy Act and Civil Liability Nuclear Damage Act. But this act hurted India's growth in the form as we failed to fetch the benefits of the waiver, and now government is ready to bring reforms to protect the interest of the corporates too. Okay, so I hope this discussion will help you to understand the nuances and the dynamics of the Indo-US nuclear deal and where there is a hiccup in the deal. Okay, let's shift to the next topic of our discussion. So the next topic is just though big news in context of the world affairs and politics, uh, multiple dimensions on which there can be a question, but not from the GS mains perspective, because it is just Trump's announcement. So clear threat and challenge to the liberal world order, okay, rising ultranationalism. In that terminology, this announcement is important. So now Trump has announced that we are ready to take over Gaza and develop it as the Rivera of Middle East. So this term, Rivera of the Middle East, though this announcement has been questioned by the Republicans itself, that we voted for US first policy. And Trump has assured that we will go for withdrawals. We do not want to entangle US in other arenas. And now you are saying we are ready to take over Gaza. So counter to that, Trump said, will not send our forces on ground. We just want to rebuild it and we will send Palestinians in Gaza out of Gaza, totally rejected by Arabs. Criticism by Iran and a lot of criticism by the state of Saudi Arabia, which is one of the ally of US. Okay. So first thing you need to know, Gaza, borders Egypt, and there's a place called Rafah. Rafah is in the news. Okay, so where Gaza Strip is, Golan Heights, Syria claimed it as its own territory, and there is a sea. What is the name of this sea? Okay, that is the Sea of Galilee. So coastal enclave, it borders Israel, where north and east. In south, it borders with Egypt. Does not share border with Jordan because Jordan shares borders with West Bank. Okay, so its location is important because Gaza is in the news, Rafah is in the news. And what you need to know is, this announcement is a major setback for the two-state solution of Palestine. Okay. As per the UN partition plan in 1948, Palestine as a territory was divided the way the division of the Indian subcontinent was as per the plan passed by the British Parliament. But this was also the colony of the Britain. But Britain was not able to maintain peace, and Britain took over this issue to UN. Okay, majority of the countries at that time voted in favor of the two-state solution. Okay, India was one of the countries who voted against two-state. India stood for one-state solution, but now India supports two-state solution. So two states were created: one Jewish Palestine, that is Israel, and one Arab Palestine, that is West Bank and Gaza. And at that time, Jerusalem became the UN administered territory. No party was ready to compromise on Jerusalem, so UN decided to keep its control in its hand. Okay, so it became a UN administered territory, Jerusalem. With time, wars took place. Arabs never accepted the partition of the Palestine, and 3 Arab-Israel war took place. First was in 48, second was in 67, okay, known as Six-Day War. And in this Six-Day War, Israel took over the political control over Gaza, right? So it was captured by Israel. Then took place 73 war, Yom Kippur War, in which also Israel was able to keep its political control intact. Post 73, peace accords started. A lot of initiatives being taken to bring peace, and from then onward, discussions started for two-state solution. In these series of accords, the first accord was the Camp David Accord, in which Egypt started diplomatic ties with Israel. Then it was Madrid Peace Accord, in which Jordan started diplomatic ties with Israel. And then came the third accord, which was the most important accord, that is Oslo Accord. In Oslo Accord, by the time we reached to this year 93, two political entities emerged within Palestine. One was PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and second, Hamas, which was in the news. So Hamas was the violent radical outfit, and Palestine became the outfit of moderate leaders who was ready for two-state solution with Israel. So this Oslo Accord was signed by the leaders of PLO, and now Israel also agreed to give the political control of Gaza and West Bank to Israel. Sorry, Gaza and West Bank to PLO. Okay. And PLO leadership also accepted the existence of Israel. And that is why Oslo Accord is seen as land for peace proposal. Okay. But this didn't change the dynamics of the region, as Hamas leadership refused to accept the legality of Oslo Accord. Okay, so status quo kept. Hamas continuously was involved in a violent conflict with Israel. Then in 2005, both parties agreed for the two-state solution, and Israel agreed to conduct elections in Gaza and West Bank. So 2005 elections took place. Hamas took over the control in Gaza and PLO took over in West Bank. They decided to have a national unity government, but in 2007, differences emerged between the leaders and government fell at that time. And since then, Gaza was politically controlled by Hamas and West Bank by PLO. Okay, so this decision of this announcement of Trump is totally against the aspirations and the wishes of the Palestinians who are demanding or who are standing for two-state solution. They, according to them, will not settle down anything less than the two-state solution with West Jerusalem. With West Jerusalem can be under the control of Israel, while East Jerusalem should be given to us. So they demand the creation of Palestine as per the UN partition plan, with East Jerusalem as their capital, and India supports the stand of Palestine. So India also supports the two-state solution. Okay. So in this context, Oslo Accord is important to know. And the most recent accord which took place to normalize the Arab-Israel ties was Abraham Accord, in which two new Arab states agreed to give recognition to the state of Israel. And those two states were Bahrain and UAE. So the issue of Palestine was losing its, the issue of Palestine was, we can say it like this, that somehow the Arab world was not ready to support this issue that aggressively the way they used to. And suddenly this Hamas-Israel conflict has brought the issue of Palestine again on the forefront. But strongly, US is standing and backing with Israel. And this announcement of US is clearly being seen as it has been seen as a decision to, we can say that this announcement is clearly in alignment with the aspirations of the right-wing leaders of Israel. The question mark has been pushed by the Republican leaders within US that how US and president can announce this as we only voted for what? America first. So this is just the announcement. We'll see how things will unfold in the coming months. Okay, so this is about this much information is important and relevant from exam point of view. And then comes the last topic of our discussion, that is India's emphasis on its neighborhood first policy. Let's discuss that. So let's discuss the third topic, that is India's neighborhood first. Now, in which context this policy of NFP, that is neighborhood first policy, is in the news, as in budget we have allocated huge sum as aid to increase the development projects. So we have allocated huge sum to build infrastructure projects, and we have increased aid for the countries of South Asia, which we consider as the part of our immediate neighborhood. So what you need to understand here is that India, since independence, is pursuing the neighborhood first policy. Okay, this is the region which we consider as most important for our strategic interest. And in the terminology of IR, this is the region we consider as our sphere of influence. This is the region where we want to maintain our strategic depth. Okay, our political influence. So we are pursuing neighborhood first since independence. And we are pursuing a concentric circle approach in our foreign policy. The main area of our focus is our immediate neighborhood. Then comes what? Extended neighborhood. So which countries lies in our extended neighborhood? Southeast Asia, West Asia, Central Asia. After immediate neighborhood comes extended neighborhood. Then comes India's engagement with the major players and powers of the world. Earlier USSR, now Russia. Post-90s, Japan, Europe, India, EU ties. So these major players and powers, Australia, New Zealand, major players and powers comes in the extended neighborhood. Our engagement with Africa as a whole continent. Our engagement with Latin American countries as a whole. Okay, so from exam point of view, dynamics of our bilateral engagement are important with which countries of the world? There are 193 states in the world. So we cannot go for our discussion on our bilateral engagement with 192. It's waste of time. The discussion on our engagement bilaterally is important with the countries of South Asia. So always there will be question in your mains from this particular region. So that is why you, as an aspirant of UPSC, you need to be well aware of the political dynamics of the South Asia and the dynamics of our bilateral ties and any new changes in our engagement with the countries of South Asia. Already questions has been asked from immediate neighborhood, that is Gujarat Doctrine, what exactly it is. Project Mosam, okay, how it can impact our ties with our neighboring countries, dynamics of SAARC, BIMSTEC. So always there will be question from our immediate neighborhood. Now, after the end of Second World War, Cold War started, which was a war between the superpowers, war of ideology. At that time also, India decided to keep superpowers at arm's length under its policy of non-alignment. So India decided to pursue non-alignment, and this led to the emergence of the movement, non-aligned movement. At that time, when we were keeping superpowers away, we decided to engage with PRC, People's Republic of China, under neighborhood first policy. At that time, so there are two Chinas in the world. One is ROC, Taiwan, and PRC, People's Republic of China, which emerged as a communist state in our neighborhood. India was the first non-communist country. We were a democratic state who gave recognition to communist China. Okay. It was US and the West who gave recognition to Taiwan. When China became one of the permanent member in UNSC, at that time, which China used to represent as a permanent member in UNSC? Taiwan, ROC. 70 onwards, dynamic change, that is a totally different, altogether different discussion. But post 70s, it was PRC who took over the permanent membership in UNSC, and ROC was displaced and which was taken over by the PRC leadership. And since then, ROC is looking forward for recognition. So even at that time, it was India who stood with PRC under neighborhood first policy. So which all country comprises under our immediate neighborhood? Nepal, Bhutan, China, Pakistan, Afghanistan. On paper, we do share border with Afghanistan, okay, because we claim POK belongs to us. In reality, we don't, but on paper, yes. Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar. Myanmar geographically lies in Southeast Asia. But as we share border, we consider Myanmar as a immediate neighbor. So dynamics of our bilateral ties are very important with the countries of this region. Political dynamics are very important to know what all is going on in this region. Okay. So, and the important organization of this region is SAARC. So when SAARC was constituted, where is the headquarter of SAARC? Who all are the members of SAARC? When Afghanistan became the member of SAARC? These are important questions for your exam. As SAARC is in deadlock because of the Indo-Pak tension, India has started emphasizing more on BIMSTEC, stands for Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. So stand for Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. So when BIMSTEC was constituted, which member countries of SAARC are not the members of BIMSTEC? Do check this. Important. Okay. So what all I have told you from this much of discussion is that India has always emphasized on which region first? Neighboring countries. And we decided we are going to connect with our neighboring countries through the principle of Panchsheel, that is Panchsheel doctrine. So Panchsheel doctrine is the doctrine which guided the foreign policy of India post-independence in dealing with its neighborhood. The 5 principles of Panchsheel were or are non-interference in each other's affairs, respect the integrity and sovereignty of each country, go for the peaceful resolution of the dispute, and basically we say Panchsheel stands for peaceful coexistence. So India announced we are going to deal with our immediate neighborhood as per the principle of Panchsheel. Now post-90s, Soviet disintegrated, Cold War ended, and US became the superpower and world became unipolar. So in the changed geopolitical environment, India announced we're going to stick to Panchsheel, but now we are going to deal with our neighboring countries as per Gujarat doctrine. Okay, so now India announced Gujarat. So we didn't change the priority of our foreign policy. We decided we'll stick with the neighborhood first, but now we'll deal with these neighboring countries under Gujarat doctrine. Gujarat doctrine is seen as Panchsheel plus 1. Okay. Most of the things, what we said under the Gujarat doctrine, there was most of the things we said was same. Okay. Most of the things we said under Gujarat doctrine was same. Okay, that's why Gujarat doctrine is also known as that it's a old wine with new packaging. Only packaging we changed. Otherwise, we said most of the things which was same under Panchsheel. So, as I said, Panchsheel plus 1. What one thing we said under Gujarat? The principle of non-reciprocity. So, India announced in Gujarat doctrine that we do not expect anything in return from the small neighboring countries of ours. Being the biggest economy, being the largest country of this region, India is here to take care of the interest of the smaller countries of South Asia. And we do not expect anything in return. So with this doctrine, India wanted to clearly reflect, we aspire to project ourselves, we want to project ourselves as a benevolent brother, not a hegemon in the region. Okay. So this principle of non-reciprocity was appreciated by the countries of this region. So our stakes and our interest lies in our immediate neighborhood. And as we have allocated more budget to build infrastructure, we want to increase our influence in the region. So pro-Indian leadership in power is in India's interest. If those leaders who hold anti-India sentiment, if acquire power, it will be a challenge for our neighborhood first policy, as suddenly we can see the regime change in Bangladesh is posing major challenge to India's NFP. New leadership of Maldives inching towards China, posing challenge to India's NFP, and the return of Taliban in Afghanistan is one of the major challenge of India's NFP. Okay. Other than this, what other thing important for you to know is that there are 3 issues on which we need the strong support from our neighboring countries, because until unless our neighboring countries will not support us, it will not going to strengthen India's stand on these issues in world politics. First, permanent membership in UNSC. Now, until unless our neighboring countries are not backing and supporting us for the permanent member, until unless they will not feel that India's presence in UN as a permanent member will strengthen the voice of the South Asian countries, it will be difficult for us to fetch the support from others. Now, is the neighboring countries are backing India for permanent membership? Almost all countries supports India's entry in UN as a permanent member in the region, except Pakistan and China. Second, on India being a nuclear weapon state, does any country fear from the nuclear arsenal of India? No neighboring country fears. Okay, India has clearly stated in its nuclear doctrine that India will never going to use weapon against non-nuclear weapon state, and India will never going to use India will never going to be the first country to use weapon. So no country fears from India's nuclear weapons, except Pakistan. Third, on the issue of Kashmir. Now, India needs the support from the leaders of South Asia on the issue of Kashmir. Because if they will support India's stand, it will dilute the stand of Pakistan in world politics, right? And almost all the countries of this region and the leaders of the countries of South Asia stands for the resolution of the issue of Kashmir as per bilateral discussion. Okay, which is in sync with India's stand as per Shimla Agreement. So India stands for the peaceful resolution of the issue of Kashmir through bilateral talks between India and Pakistan and no third party interference. And this stand is being supported by the countries of South Asia. Okay, when India abrogated 370, no leader of South Asian countries criticized India's decision of abrogation. All leaders accepted that 370 is an issue between the Indian government and the people of Kashmir. Okay. So Pakistan wants to regionalize it, internationalize it, but India wants the resolution through bilateral talks, and South Asian countries backs India on this issue. So India wants to keep its influence intact. India needs the strong support from the neighboring countries on these issues. Okay. And that is why India wants to keep its strategic depth intact. And one way to do is by investing, building infrastructure in these countries. And this is the step exactly in this direction. Okay. So hopefully this discussion will going to help you to prepare for your exam in both pre and mains perspective. We'll come with the next discussion next week. Whatever updates will be there in the whatever updates, if there'll be any updates regarding pre and mains next week, we'll continue our discussion and see you then. Best of luck, best wishes, keep preparing. Bye, take care.